Good afternoon. This is April 9th, 2020, and this is the second part of the safety planning series. This video is focused on individuals who are in unsafe or abusive environments, and it is to provide coping strategies for those spaces for people who aren't yet ready to leave, and then strategies for individuals who may be today or soon be in a space of wanting to leave that abusive environment. So I will share the screen right now for the presentation. Okay. So it's important to point out that individuals who are experiencing violence are the experts on their situation and their experience. So I want to point that out because as much as we all might want to infer our opinion or may have ourselves experienced violence, it is different for each individual. And it is important that the person that's experiencing the violence is able to use their intuition and their knowledge and their choices to decide what is best for them. So this is focused on empowering individuals to move towards either a safer environment or to leave an abusive environment. We'll first go into coping strategies. So these are more so for people who are not yet in a place of leaving because they haven't chosen to, it's not safe, whatever the reasons may be. So coping strategies are things that you can do in an environment to help you to get through the day-to-day where you know that you either cannot leave or are not yet ready to leave, and things that you can do to alleviate the experience that you are having. So something important to keep in mind with this is to identify and work towards achievable goals. So one of those things might be setting a goal for yourself to connect with a local resource and just go over your options. So kind of speak to someone in your area and have them explain to you what your choices are if and when you're ready to leave that space. It also might be an opportunity to connect with an advocate who is someone that you might decide will be an important part of your journey at some point in time. It's important to remember that you don't have to do anything that you're not comfortable with right now, but taking these small steps and building up the confidence to leave an abusive relationship can help you to get to the place where you're ready to leave. Something that helps a lot of people within those spaces is to find an environment for themselves, if possible, where they can retreat. So if you're living in a home where there is a space that you can make a better space for yourself or peaceful space for yourself, that might be something to look at doing. So for instance, maybe it's a spare bedroom, or it's a nook in a room, or it's a part in your yard, meaning a place in your yard, or some area that you can go. Maybe you can read, maybe you can meditate, maybe you can just find some space to self-reflect on how you're feeling and ways in which you want to move forward in that day, in that space, in that time. So it's important through this to continue to remind yourself of your worth, to remember that you matter, that you are important, and that despite what someone might be doing to you, you are an important human being. And it might feel some days that you don't have the strength to keep going. And it might feel some days that what the person is telling you is true, but finding that time each day, whether it's in that safe space that you've created for yourself within your mind, in the morning, at night, but just continuing to remind yourself of that mantra that you are important, that you are strong, that you are resilient, and that you will get through this. And be kind to yourself. So when you can, practice self-care every day. So I mean, this could be something as simple as taking a shower. Many people take for granted the things that they get to do on a daily basis that to some are a luxury. So even if that 5 minutes a day that you have is to take a shower, or to, use lotion, to meditate, to exercise, to drink some tea, to drink some coffee, to do something to nourish your body, your mind, and your soul. And remember that in many situations, and I'm not going to get too much into the signs or the experiences that people have in interpersonal violence situations on purpose, because this video is not intended to trigger anyone. But as we know, lots of times there are efforts to isolate. So it's important to create a support network, to stay connected with people despite what individuals might be telling you about those people, and find a way to do so safely if you can. And things that you want to think about moving forward is kind of, if you're not in that space, or you're not sure if you will be in that space to leave an environment, to imagine what life would look like if you were outside of that environment. So start to paint a picture for yourself of the life that you deserve, of the life that you dreamed of before you got to this place. And think back to times that were happy, safe, and that you felt hope, because that is what will help to build up your resilience. And I want to recognize that anyone who's in an abusive environment knows the risk of remaining in the home and in the relationship. And there are probably some people in your life that want to tell you what you should do or how you should do it, or communicate that they don't understand why you would stay. This video is specifically, and this information is a no judgment zone. It's just really to provide tools and information to remind you again that you are the expert of this situation. Want you to feel empowered to make the decisions that are best for you, that are safest for you, when the time is right. So things to think about in an emergency. So an emergency would be a situation where this isn't just an issue of staying in an abusive relationship. Someone perhaps is at risk of imminent harm. So things to think about is not running into a room with no escape. So a closet, somewhere where you think there may be weapons in the home. It's actually a pretty good idea to remove weapons from the home if and when possible. The kitchen, where there probably is no egress, no door, and think of places ahead of time that perhaps you could go if this situation arises. So a safe place such as a neighbor's house, and know when to call 911. If you have children in the home, this one is a little bit of an area where you're really going to need to think about what's best for you in your situation. But in most instances, you would not want to run to where the children are, as your partner may hurt them as well, or may hurt you in front of them. For some people, that is a barrier that a partner has never crossed. And so for them, they may sleep with their children, or they may spend more time with their children because that's a protective factor that they have. But in an emergency where emotions are high, or where someone is in a state of committing violence, it is best to not engage the children in that situation. So if you are able to, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, have an emergency bag available, have things ready in it, have it in a location where you can grab it quickly. Better yet, have it somewhere separate from the place that you live or the environment that you're in with this abusive individual. I want to recognize too that we're mostly framing this around romantic or interpersonal relationships where people cohabitate, but this also could be the situation where you're a caregiver for someone and you might spend time outside of the home in their home, or it could be a situation where you're in a workplace environment and this is happening. So it is transferable, but for the most part in this video, we would be talking about when someone is living in a space with someone else in a domestic situation, whether they are their romantic partner, their child, their sibling, whomever whatever the relational dynamic might be. So other things to think about ahead of time and to utilize in an emergency is coming up with a safety communication plan with code words with someone that you trust. So whether that's a neighbor, a coworker, a family member, friend, whomever it might be, it's really difficult to talk about this, but if you are in a space of not being ready to leave, but knowing that there is a risk that you could be really harmed, or perhaps not be able to leave that environment because you are fatally harmed, it is really a good idea to connect with people and come up with a plan about what would happen in an emergency if you need them. So setting up a communication plan as to how you would get in touch with them is really important. Coming up with code words that the person that is causing the harm or other people outside of you and that friend would know what they meant, so that they know when this person sends me this message, whether it's through a text message, email, social media, whatever the means, leaves a voicemail. This word means I need to do this. Or maybe there's multiple words that communicate something to each of you in these scenarios. It is a good idea, if you can, to have a phone that is untraceable, that is not part of a phone plan, that is a phone that you could buy from the store, a disposable phone perhaps. I'm not exactly sure of the terminology, that you keep hidden somewhere in the place that you live, so that if and when you need to contact someone, that person doesn't know that you're doing so, and it's not traceable. So that's something to keep in mind in terms of the safety in this communication plan. And ultimately, and I understand the complexities of calling 911 based on your experience, based on how the social justice system works, sometimes based on the intersections of people's identity, the communities that you live in, and how that all plays into this. But if this person is going to hurt you or hurt others badly, it may come to the point where you need to call 911 and have someone come in and interject. So that's something to keep on the table at all times, even though I understand all the complex reasons why someone might not call. So not everyone who is in an abusive relationship or abusive environment has children, but if you do have children, there are some different things to keep in mind. You know, a lot of people want to shelter the children from what is happening, but children see a lot more than people realize. And ultimately, they know the truth of what is happening. So the better that, the more transparent you can be in communicating to them, to reassure them that it's not their fault, that they didn't do anything wrong, and to let them know that there is a plan if something happens and someone needs to get to safety, and to just support them in their emotional well-being. It's important to teach them certain things or go through certain things with them. And ultimately, you have to also keep in mind that in situations such as this, there are consequences for exposing children to violence in a way that could have been interrupted. And I don't say that to put extra weight on someone who has children and is experiencing violence, but ultimately, when it comes down to the criminal justice system or the family court system, if you knowingly are allowing a child to stay in an environment where there is violence, that's something that could be held against you at some point later on down the line. So you want to think about these decisions and get as much support as possible, so you know what all your options are, you know what all the risks are from every direction, and you're making informed decisions. So at the very beginning, teaching children how to dial 911, reassuring them, even if you don't fully believe it yourself, and maybe it's part of walking through how to interact with police based on where you live and what your identity is and what the reality is for interaction with certain individuals in certain places. Have those conversations with your children even before the time that you might be ready to have them, because they need to know that if you are unsafe, if they are unsafe, that they can call these people despite everything else that they might be seeing or experiencing. So this is an important part of the conversation, and it's a difficult part of the conversation. Make sure that they know a safe place for them inside and outside of the home. So on days where the individual who is causing harm is not there, do kind of a drill, sort of. And this is no ideal situation for anyone, but the same as you would do a safety drill in school or fire safety drill at home, walk through with them what this could look like if X, Y, or Z happen, and communicate to them how important that is to keep that information between you. And I think this is a good time to talk to kids about, you know, secrets, versus, you know, when it's okay to keep a secret, and when it comes to someone's safety and when it's something serious like this, it's important that they understand what that means. Because again, if we're looking at our value system and the people that are involved, if this is a person that they care about, and they feel that they owe them a certain obligation to be truthful to or act in a certain way, they are going to need a lot of help rationalizing why it's okay to keep certain things from this person. So it's really having these very difficult conversations with kids in a way that they're relatable and they understand where you're coming from. And then also teaching them how to distinguish between a real emergency and a simple argument, meaning children living in abusive environments are pretty hypervigilant most of the time. So that's not something that's going to be remedied just by talking to them. However, that hypervigilance could then go into any sort of verbal argument or any sort of disagreement, that child then thinking they need to engage the safety plan. So it's, again, going to be a lot of preparation, a lot of clear communications, clear expectations of the difference between those things. And so give them important phone numbers, give them somewhere safe to keep those phone numbers, or help them to memorize those phone numbers. It might be a neighbor, it might be a family friend, it might be a family member. That's important too. And teach them that it's not their job to interrupt the violence. So how to get help, to delegate the help, to call one of those trusted people, to go to the neighbor's house, to call 911, to do one of the things that you ask them to do, but never for them to put their bodies between yours and the other person or other people, or so on and so forth. So this might involve planning a code word as well, when you make it very clear to the child, if I say this word, this is what I need you to do. This is what's expected of you at this point too. And that also removes some of the burden of them just trying to distinguish between what is an argument and what is a true emergency. And so, I mean, this next one goes into what I was talking about before. Children are just going to feel so conflicted in these situations, especially if it's two parents. So letting them know that it's not their job to intervene, that it's not their responsibility to manage the violence. And, you know, ways to help them outside of this is connecting them with counseling services. If it's not safe for the child to go to counseling outside of the time they're in school, because you would not want a parent, another parent, or a partner, or another family member to know that they're engaging in counseling, I would encourage you to work with your school. Lots of schools will offer counseling one-on-one, and many schools, at least in Clinton County, are offering satellite services through community mental health agencies to offer children support. So that is a good way to access those services and not alert anyone in the family that those services are being accessed. And, you know, remind your children, despite what they're seeing, that violence is never okay. Even if the person that's being violent or causing harm is someone that you love, that doesn't give them a pass to hurt you or to hurt them. And another thing to think about is, as these things kind of get more complicated, you have to think about the sophistication of managing children a little bit more, in that if a couple are both parents of a child without a protective order or without a custody order that clearly defines when each parent should have the child, essentially the parent could take the child at any point in time. So if you're in a position where you are feeling unsafe, that the abuser or the person causing harm might use your child as a pawn, or might use your child as a way to hurt you, you want to make sure that you are utilizing the family court and the criminal justice system to mitigate some of that risk. So meaning, even if you're still living in the same environment, creating some sort of custodial plan, or creating some sort of restraining or protective order if the violence has gone too far and criminal justice system needed to be involved at some point. And so again, we are saying within this video that whatever you choose to do, you will be supported. We understand the complexities of leaving. We understand, and when I say we, I mean the Title IX office, the staff, and many of the resources that are in our community. We get it. So again, this is not to say you must leave. We of course would encourage people to leave an abusive environment and support them in doing so. But no one can make that decision for you. So I would encourage people to think about creating a safety plan, whether or not they ever plan on using it. So Safety planning while you're still living with the person who's causing harm is a little bit more challenging. So part of what we're going to navigate is different ways to do that. And again, you are the experts. You know your environment. You know what this person's triggers are. You probably know the patterns by now. So I am offering strategies and tools that may need to be tweaked, and this might not be an exhaustive list that serves you. So this is why I do encourage anyone viewing this video just starting to digest this information and think about how they could use it or how they can move forward in the safety plan, to think about connecting with a resource in your area that specializes in supporting individuals who are experiencing interpersonal and or sexual violence, and to sit down if you can with that support or that resource and go through your individualized experience and situation. So part of what you're going to want to be able to do, or what you will develop as a skill, is identifying your partner's or the person in your home's use of and level of force, so you can really know what you need to do next. And like we talked about early, identifying safe areas of the home, going through drills with either by yourself or with other members of your household, to plan out and practice what you would do if and when you need to. If you're in a situation where violence is unavoidable, despite anything that you are doing, and I think it's really important to make it clear and point a few things out here before moving on. In many situations, people will go over a list of things that the person that was being abused could have done or should have done or should do. So, and that sucks, right? Because it almost makes it feel like the people are saying, well, if you had done these things, then this wouldn't have happened to you. Or why didn't you do these things? And that's really a lot of where we need growth in our criminal justice system and across areas everywhere in responding and supporting individuals who have experienced interpersonal violence, because it is so easy to be in a place of, why didn't you do this? Or why didn't you think of that? If you are not the person experiencing violence. So what I want to say to anyone watching this right now is that me going through different things that you might want to think about doing is in no way to communicate to you that you are responsible for anything that is happening to you, that has happened to you, or that will happen to you. It is just in the hope that if at some point in time you are able to engage these tools or this information, you will have it. And if you are in a place where you're experiencing violence and you cannot engage these tools or tactics that we're talking about, there's nothing wrong with you. People have very individual reactions to violence and trauma, and sometimes you can't control anything that is happening, no matter how strong you are or how much you know. So again, these are just in case, if they are helpful, and they are never, this is not to create a solution to a problem that you didn't make. This is just to help you cope in a situation that maybe you're ready to leave. So things to think about in ways that you could physically block yourself in a way that you aren't harmed as much. Know where a phone is at all times. And again, this is where I would recommend having a phone somewhere hidden in the house that your partner doesn't know about, that is not traceable, that you can plan to get to an emergency, or hopefully get to an emergency. Know where the nearest public phone is located. This is going to be tougher because we live in a time of cell phones, and there might not be such a thing. So it might be knowing a neighbor that you can go to, or a store that you can go to, or even at this point in time, running out and finding someone who probably has a cell phone with them. Know the phone to your local shelter, to your local domestic violence resource. And again, and I'm sorry, I keep repeating this because it's just trying to reaffirm that sometimes the best place to call is the police. In this PowerPoint or this presentation, there's this link that will bring you to an example of a safety plan that was created by an organization in Connecticut. It may not perfectly suit you. There might be things on it that don't apply to you or that you don't believe in, but ultimately is a good example of what a safety plan may look like for you. So if you go on this, it's the Connecticut Coalition Against Domestic Violence. You can map something like this out. Again, if you're going to map out a safety plan, it may not be safe for you to have that accessible in your home. So you might want to think about doing this with an advocate at a resource center, at work, somewhere where you can keep it, that there's not a risk that the person causing harm to you is going to find it. So this is the form. You can go through and fill out as little or as much as you'd like to, and the link is part of this video. So some of the things on this slide are a bit repetitive, so I won't go over those again. But other things you'd want to think about other than children might be pets that would be in the home, other family members that might be in the home, visitors that might be in the home. And other things you want to prepare for is a situation where your partner or the individual causing harm in the home might find out about your plan. What will you say to them? How will you explain it? How are you going to walk through that? So those are things that could happen, and planning for them ahead of time may become helpful for you in the future. Things also to think about, backing your car, if you do have a car, do drive a car, into the driveway, keeping it fueled so that if you need to get away, you can get away as quick as possible. And thinking of different reasons why you may need to leave the house. So if you feel like things are starting to escalate, or you just know it's a certain day or time, or something has happened that might increase the possibility of this person causing harm, think of things ahead of time. Like, could it be that you have a work event? Could it be that you need to go help a friend? What is your saving grace? What are some things that this individual who causes harm would maybe not question, or it would be easier for you to utilize as a way to leave the home, either just for a little while or for good. And so different places that you can get help other than supportive people you might know, and other than some resources that we have talked about. Your primary care physician, if you go to a doctor's office, if you are just in a place where you don't have support people, or you are in a very rural or isolated environment based on your geographic location, or just based on the place that you live with the individual causing harm, you might want to utilize your doctor's office as an opportunity to communicate that you need help. If you work outside of the home, connecting with your employer, I think when you feel safe, it's always a very good idea to let your employer know what's going on in the event that the person causing harm shows up to your work and it is not safe for you, and they know that you might need their backup or help during that time. It would be a good idea to get as many people as you feel comfortable in the loop as to what's going on. Knowing domestic violence support services in your area. In Clinton, Franklin, and Essex County, we have Stop Domestic Violence, which has a 24-hour hotline listed on this slide. And additionally, they offer advocacy, so meaning going with you to any sort of criminal justice appointments, court hearings, getting you safe housing where the individual causing harm would not know where you are. And this emergency support is still open during this time that we are in physical distancing. So remotely, you can connect with these resources and services, and they will help you to get to a safe place, despite the fact that we are dealing with these unprecedented times. So a lot of people who have not been in a cycle of violence, or don't understand the complexities to a cycle of violence, don't step back to think about that a lot of people in abusive relationships, they've grown accustomed to knowing what to expect. So maybe they're walking on eggshells, maybe they are in a pattern of abuse and it's not a healthy situation for them, but they become skilled in knowing how to navigate that environment and pretty much knowing, well, I know if this happens, that will be the consequence. So it is scary sometimes to think about what that would look like if you leave, because you don't know what's going to happen after you leave that abusive environment. You know, and a lot of people know within their guts, or within, because of their knowledge and because of many other factors, that leaving would or could lead to a different type of life. But there's also the reality that the first 2 weeks after someone leaves are the most dangerous time for a person. So we have to recognize the fact that the more you can get wrapped around with support and services, and the more prepared that we can be, the more it will alleviate that risk of harm. So this slide is just really to validate that true feeling of, I can get through day to day, and it's not good, and I don't deserve this, but at least I know what I'm waking up to every day. And if I leave, I don't know what I'm walking into. So that is a real thing. That is a valid experience. And leaving is a scary time. So I want to make sure that we recognize this as part of this presentation. If you are in the point where you have said, I am ready to go, it would be, if you can, and again, keeping things in a safe place, keeping evidence of abuse specifically, and we talk about this in some other training videos, that a lot of people who are abusive are very sophisticated at abusing the people that they harm in a way that is not illegal, or isn't well traced, or it is just brushing the barrier of the point where they could be held to consequence. So as much of a burden as you might have already, and as much as you are already experiencing, the reality is that we are living in a society, and we are living in a society that is not sophisticated enough to deal with the way in which abusers engage. So a lot of times those patterns take a lot of documentation, pictures, evidence, and it can become so exhausting to try to talk to, whether it's the criminal justice system, the courts, family courts, and trying to explain what you've experienced or why you've got to where you have come. So if you can keep a journal, if you can keep dates, times, as much information as possible, photographs, as hard and heavy as that is, and as much as it is not your burden to prove to anyone that a person has caused you harm, it is the reality of having this information if and when you want to hold that person accountable. And so if you're ready, going to those resources, letting them know that you need support in getting out, going to a doctor, an emergency room if there's injuries, and making sure that they document it. Because I will tell you right now, I have met someone at the emergency room at 3 o'clock in the morning, and I could not believe that the nurse had not called the state police, or that no one had taken photographs of the individual. And, so that's why sometimes having a support person with you who knows these are the things that should be happening to speak on your behalf, but not for you, are really, really important. Because essentially, in many instances, if it's not documented, or if it's not documented well enough, there will sometimes be no consequence for the person that's causing harm. Other things you want to think about in these situations is finding ways to put yourself in a position to leave. So sometimes there is isolation, financial isolation. There might not be resources to better your situation. So if you have ways to acquire job skills, or train somewhere, or to go to college or school or other things, try to enact that. And I know how hard that is. I mean, it's difficult if you're experiencing trauma on a day-to-day basis and you are in the cycle of violence, to just get out of bed every day. So this isn't going to work for everyone, and not everyone's going to be ready. But if you feel like this is a possibility for you to get out there and to access these resources, this could be something that helps you to move to that next level and get out of that space. If you have the capacity to, keeping money aside. Some people don't leave because they don't have the money to do so, or they don't have support to do so, or whatever the reasons may be. So if you can save money or resources, that's a good idea as well. Things to think about if you're ready to leave. Make sure you know where your identification is. So things like that would be your driver's license, birth certificates, children's birth certificates, your social security cards, your children's social security cards, any financial information, so tax information, deeds to homes, bank account information, titles to cars that you might own, any of those things, having them in a very safe, and again, if you can, in a place outside of the space where you're experiencing violence, are very, can be protective factors as you're navigating getting through the few weeks or months after leaving. And so also having maybe credit cards that the individual causing harm doesn't know about hidden in another location, money, a separate checking account if it's a partnership where you would usually share funds. Start working on legal paperwork ahead of time if you can. So protective orders, this can be done through the family court system, or it would be done through the criminal justice system if there's an arrest in a domestic violence situation. So keeping copies, again, of your lease or rental agreement, your deed, because if this is a situation where the individual that is causing harm lives with you and you cannot get them out of the space that you're living in, you want to find ways to at least document your rights to things, or the reasons why you may need to leave an environment because you can't, in effect, make that person leave the environment. Insurance papers, life insurance papers, school records, all the things, passports, marriage license, divorce decree, if that's something, and custody papers. If you leave an environment and you don't take the children with you right away for whatever reason, because it's not safe, or because you need to do something in order to take the children from that point on, if there is no custody agreement in order, you would want to check with your local family court system, and they won't provide legal advice, but they could recommend some attorneys who could give you information on what is the risk if I leave, because in some states, if you leave, there might be a consequence to where you would not be given custodial rights, or it would impact your ability to have custodial rights or visitation. And additionally, it might be viewed as leaving the child in an abusive or unsafe environment. So you want to, this is so much, and I understand that, but if you go back to the beginning of the presentation, that's why it's kind of taking those small steps as you go. And also for anyone watching this who is not experiencing violence, when you start to see the way that these things layer up, and how many things that you actually have to be thinking about, and how many things that you might need to be preparing for, that should help you understand a little bit better why people don't leave. Emergency numbers. So again, police, sheriff, domestic violence resources, doctor's office, hospital, county and district attorney's office, advocates if you have them, family members, whomever is on your list of support, your web, the people that you can go to who that when you are ready to leave are going to wrap around you and help you to get through this time period and help to keep you safe. Other things to think about, which, you would prioritize for yourself what is most important to you, and no one can make that priority for you except for yourself. So in going through some of this, you might think some of these things don't apply, or I don't really care about that. And that's part of the reason of walking through this ahead of time and creating your own individualized self-care plan, because a lot of what I'm saying might not resonate at all, or I might be missing things that are important to you. So other things people might want to think about specifically if they have health issues or health concerns that they need to stay on top of is medication. If you have jewelry that's important to you, if you have car keys that are going to help you to get out of that space, where can they be somewhere that you can get them? If you need contact information for people, pictures, and things that children have made. So sentimental things are usually a pretty big thing, and they sometimes can be a thing that get forgotten in all of this, understandably. So if you can, again, have those things in a place that's super safe, not super safe, because I want to hesitate using the word safe in general because no one can guarantee safety in these situations. But if you can think of a place that might be safer to put those items and that you can retrieve them either when you leave or at a later time when it's safe, that might be something that you want to think about as well. So a lot of information in a short period of time. Again, this is not exhaustive. Again, how you are experiencing violence is based on you, who you are as a person, based on your relationship with that person, based on your identity as a person, based on your location, where do you live, who are you around, who are you not around, you know, what are your resources. So I just want to communicate that I understand how compounded this is, how different it is for everyone, and how the decisions you have to make will be weighed differently based on the experiences that you've had. But no matter what your identity, no matter what your experience, no matter the violence that you are experiencing, you deserve to have a life that is filled with peace, love, safety, and hope. So if you get to a space where you want to move more towards that or leave the environment that you're in, please know that there are resources for you in your area. There are people that are here and ready to help you and help you in a way that empowers you and supports your choices and your experience. Things to think about after you leave. That's something else that we need to cover. If you plan on going back to the home and being the person that resides there, you would want to think about changing the locks, your phone number. Ask that the phone number is blocked. It is very common. And again, if we look at the cycle of violence and kind of, you know, that violence occurs and the romance period of trying to get someone to come back, someone who's caused harm is going to try really hard to get in touch with you after you've left an abusive situation because they want to get back in your head. They want to convince you you made the wrong choice. I will never do this again. Please come back. Please, we can work on this. So any barrier you can set to that communication right off the bat is going to help to mitigate the risk of that person getting into contact with you. You might want to change the way you normally do things. If you went on a jog every morning at 9 a.m. On a certain trail, don't do that. And again, it's so annoying that people who've experienced harm have to change their schedule, but ultimately it is going to become, and it has been, your responsibility for you to be the number one person that helps you to get your life back, to pull your life back. It's going to take a lot of energy. I'm not going to lie to you. It's going to take time. It's going to take healing, but you can do it. And these are some of the ways to help to get to that place sometime sooner. So change routes for children, alert schools. If there's a custody order in effect, give it to the school that the children are in. Let them know that you are the only person, or if you have a designated person that's safe to pick them up from school, are the only people that can pick the child up from school. And if there are restraining orders in effect, get those to your employer or get those to your students, your children's school. And then if you don't have copies of those order of protection, which can sometimes happen in a situation, make sure you are following up law enforcement or family court to get copies of those so you have them with you if and when you need them. Think about not having a physical address where you live so someone can't track you if and when you are moving to a new place, a post office box, or use a friend's address or a family member's address during the time that you need it. Think about appointments that your partner might be aware of. Think about ways to change those. Don't go to the same stores that you might have frequented, at least not at first. And let neighbors, people you work with, and others know what's going on so they can keep an eye out and they can help to support you. Other things you might want to think about in terms of safety in your home is security systems, motion lighting, and anything that will help you to feel I guess I'm struggling to find the word, but things for you that might help you to feel more comfortable in the new environment that you're in, or the new life that you've entered. So keep that mantra in your mind. You're strong enough to face it all, even if it doesn't feel like it right now. And many days it won't feel like it. Even many days after you've left that situation. But an experience that someone imposes upon you is not your responsibility. And that experience is not the sum of your being. So it's important to keep that in perspective. And not leaving doesn't make you strong. It doesn't mean that you're not strong. Sometimes the strength is in acknowledging that we need help, we need time, whatever we need. But just know you're not in this alone. For additional information, here are some links to some websites. There are also national hotlines that you can access through the internet, through the Title IX page. If you have more questions, you can reach out at title.ix@plattsburgh.edu. These links are really unique because if you go onto them from a cell phone or a computer, even if you type them in the way that they show up on the screen, if you hit escape or quit, it won't track the history. So if that abusive individual in your life goes to check your history, which sometimes people do in these scenarios, it will erase it as if you've never gone there. Some of them are set up to make it look like you've been on another site. So those are options for you. And there's also ways through there that you can seek out help, but exit that window or that space if the individual causing harm is present, comes to where you are, and it's no longer safe to be on that page. So thank you for sitting through this video. And again, please reach out.